So yeah, this is the spot where my mum and dad had their ashes scattered, and it's a beautiful spot on a beautiful day in March, and my parents' ashes were scattered back in September, I think, end of September or October 2022, just over to the right side of that bin near where those bushes are, just kind of there. And I'll move the camera a little bit more over there so you can see where it is. Yeah, so my parents got scattered there, and this is going to be just a little bit about them, really. My mum and dad both met in Birmingham. My mum lived in Scotland and was brought up in Scotland, and she moved down to Birmingham when she was 21. I think she met my dad when she was around about 25 and got married not long afterwards. And after they were married, they decided to move up to Scotland and start up a hairdressing shop that was owned by my mum's parents in Brecon, and it was called Penny Hairdressers, and they did really well. This was in the 1960s. By the way, before that, my mum had been working in a hairdresser's in Lewis's in Birmingham. She was the assistant manageress. She also started the trade unions there because they had appalling working conditions, which I think impressed my dad because he was very much into socialism at the time. So anyway, they moved up to Scotland. They started this hairdressing business, and it went really, really well. My dad did a lot of the tinting, and my mum did the perms, and they enjoyed it. And that's where I was born. In fact, I was born in Dundee Hospital, and then almost 3 years later my sister was born. And it was just after my sister was born that my dad really started to miss Birmingham, and he got homesick. And eventually my parents decided to sell the shop and move down to Birmingham, to the West Midlands, and that's where I grew up, in West Midlands. And they changed business. They became a partnership of Penny Bishop with my dad's old friend, I think he was from school, Gordon Bishop, who they both began doing making suede and leather clothes for mainly country and western style clothes, and they employed quite a lot of people, and it did really well again until eventually they got burgled twice, and it was just after they'd done the big orders, 2 big orders, which kind of broke them financially. And that was when, in fact, they weren't insured because the building they were living in wasn't safe enough anyway to be insured. So that was, you know, that was a big mistake on their part as well. So the partnership folded, and my dad's friend Gordon Bishop decided to look into doing a different occupation, and my dad decided that he would move his business back home with my mum, because my mum always worked with him. My mum was the sewer. She worked on the machines, and my dad did the cutting and a lot of the gluing, etc. So yeah, so they moved the business back home. They still kept one staff, and I remember her as I was growing up. So they worked at home in their veranda, and they were very close to our next door neighbours. In fact, every time I come back from school, I would find them in the next door neighbour's house. So yeah, so they did really well, and we had a really nice, I had a really nice childhood really up there. In fact, I spent 2 years in a private school because my sister had trouble at her infant school. When she was in primary school, she had problems with a teacher who wasn't particularly nice to her. So my parents decided to send us to a private school. I went there for 2 years, and the first year I hated it. I was in a class full of older students than me. They were a year older, and I had no idea of anything really. I hadn't been taught very much, so I was constantly getting bad marks and bullied, and yeah, I hated it. A year after that, most of the bullies left, and I went into a small class of about 11 of us, and I did really well. I learnt to play the piano, which I've forgotten now, unfortunately, but I did play the piano really well. Had elocution lessons, and I did really well in speech and drama. So yeah, and we had really nice holidays. We went on holiday camping with my dad's friend and their children. We used to go horse riding, and my dad, you know, they made sure that we had, you know, all the best opportunities really. I remember my dad taking me ice skating when I was little. So it was a really idyllic, well, not idyllic, but it was a very happy place. My parents are very sociable. They're very welcoming to people, you know, of all races. They wouldn't even dream of being racist. And I went to a high school which I really enjoyed. And well, I didn't enjoy the beginning of it actually, but I enjoyed the end of it. And I did 2 operas at the last 2 years, which were Gilbert and Sullivan, HMS Pinafore, the first year, and then in my final year we did the Mikado. I'm with my best friend Helen, and we both sang. I sang in a guitar group with her as well. So that was 2 operas that we were in, and my sister was in it as well. Most of the people were younger than us, from younger years, but we really had a good time. And I was also a librarian with my friend Elaine, and we had, yeah, really nice years. I went to Germany on an exchange student holiday. So then when I went to college, I went to college to basically reset some of my O levels, and I was considering doing A-level chemistry, which I didn't get very far with really. But it was during this time when I was going to college, and it was in sort of a place called Rowley Regis, which near Halesowen, which is not around anymore, but it had a big mixture of different ethnic groups, and it was a very friendly place, and that's where I met my friend Shanaz, who I've stayed in contact with all these years, just as a pen friend, and we occasionally meet up now. She's moved to London, and of course my parents moved down to Bournemouth. They decided they didn't want to be there anymore, they wanted to be in Bournemouth, so we moved down to Bournemouth. and it was really, really nice. I loved it, Bournemouth, for the first year or so. Then I started getting really homesick for my friends. I started at the college, and my parents had a shop at the Lansdowne, a clothes shop for women, and for a while it did well in the summer, but they realised very quickly that the client coming in were mainly students that didn't have a lot of money, so yeah, eventually they moved the business back home again, and for a while they kept it. They tried to keep it going and making more in suede and leather, trying to sell them, but this was in the 1980s, of course. They moved down in 1983 down to Bournemouth. But towards the end of the 80s, my dad was getting to the point where he felt the business just wasn't going well enough, and they needed to bring in extra money. At this time, my brother had been at school. Yeah, this was... So eventually I suggested they thought about fostering, because they had taken in like homeless people, some of our homeless friends. One guy who had had a brain damage due to sniffing glue sniffing, and they took him in 1987, just after I became a Christian, and it was a very cold winter, and he'd been living in an empty house on his own, had basically no money, so my parents just took him under their wing, and he lived with them for about 18 months, and after that they also took in some other friends. So by 1990 I decided I was going to move abroad. I was into travelling with my friends and wanted to go fruit picking in France. Before that, the year before that, 1990, my parents decided to start fostering. So they started fostering, and eventually they became assessment foster carers. And my dad used to say to the social workers, "Give us the worst you've got," and often they did. Well, not always, but they often had 3 teenagers all at once that to most people would be a complete handful, but to my parents it was all taken in their stride. And it was, I'm not sure exactly when my mum started teaching in adult education, but she went as a volunteer at the beginning, and then quickly got offered a teaching role in maths, in a maths class, and then later in English, and also in drama. So she was teaching 3 different subjects at adult education, and she really enjoyed it, as well as being a foster carer and assessment foster carer, which meant that, you know, she was getting, they were getting quite well paid. And I was travelling around France, Corsica, for a couple of years, and then eventually I'd come back sometimes, find a job for a short while, then go back again. You know, I was always like wanting to move around and explore people, things, but eventually the company, I got really tired with them, and I just decided that I'd had enough of being around people who seem to drink an awful lot and just get drunk all the time, and that had no appeal to me. I wasn't interested in that. So I decided that I wanted to go back to college, and at the time there was access courses to university, which I applied for, and that was not far from where my parents lived. In fact, it was in Everton Road. There were certain buildings there that had been turned into colleges, like old buildings that had been turned into colleges, and so I started going there, and I was living at my parents'. And eventually, after studying for about a year there, I found a place at uni and to do theology, and this was at University of Kent, which also included a year in Israel, which was the main reason that I chose that subject. And all the time my parents were always very supportive of what I'd chosen to do. And the year that oh, by the way, they also came to visit us in France, in the south of France, when we were living there, along with my brother. That includes my sister, because my sister was travelling with me for quite a while, for quite a few years too. And then my sister came back and met a guy, and found out she was pregnant, and had a little boy, and that was in my second year at uni that she had her son Jacob. And of course, my third year at uni, I had gone out to spend a whole year in Israel, and during that time in Israel, I had been offered a house to live in before I went, by another student who was doing a master's degree out there, and he'd been living in the West Bank, renting a ground floor of a property that belonged to an Arab Palestinian family. So he'd come out to meet the students that were coming over that year, and he asked any of the students if they were interested in renting a place with him. And two of the young male students were interested, as was I, because I was a mature student, of course. And I found out just before that the Hebrew University doesn't take mature students into their accommodation. So I had basically no choice but to share a ground floor property with 3 male students in the West Bank. That was fine though, because they were all younger than me. So although they didn't realise it, I think, as I did look quite young at the time. And yeah, I acted quite young as well. I was always doing silly things. So yeah, I spent a whole year out there, and we did travel, we did move around, and it was a big learning curve as well. There is an awful lot to learn from this place, which was actually, we were living in a valley that was just across from another valley or hill, which would have been which was called Al-Lazariah, or Bethany in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, it was called Bethany, where Lazarus was resurrected, and the Palestinians called it El-Lazariah, and they had a little place that was supposed to be the actual burial place of where Lazarus was buried. Although, to be honest, I think that was very unlikely. The real place where Lazarus was buried, I think people just picked the spot in a wall that you go down to through some steps, but then you know, it might have been. We don't know really. Yeah. My parents also came out to visit us and stayed in the house where I was staying, because one of the male students started going out with one of the girl students who was like up at the campus, and they decided to move to the old city in Jerusalem and find a place together. So my parents were able to stay in that room that they'd been staying in, and then my sister came out to visit after my parents went to visit. My parents came for 2 weeks, and we visited Cairo. We went down to Cairo in a little bus and stayed there for a few days, visited the pyramids, and bought some nice Egyptian oils, and then yeah, then my sister came to visit with my nephew Jacob, who was this time he was 1, and we visited northern Israel, which by the way I'd already visited anyway. With the other students on a big long tour of the whole of Israel, which was yeah, for academic purposes as well. We also visited Masada and the Dead Sea. We went in the Dead Sea with my sister, and so we had a good time. We really had a nice time. To be honest, we had a lot more freedom than a lot of the other indigenous population living there. So, and then after my sister went back, by the end of the courses that we were finishing, a friend and my friend Sue, we both decided to visit Jordan. So yeah, so we went up to Jordan and had Petra. We went to Petra, and it always struck me as such a lonely place, Petra. Probably because I'd just broken up with a boyfriend at the time that I was probably besotted with a little bit, and she had just broken up with her boyfriend, who was one of the students, and so we were both kind of feeling a bit, you know, lonesome. But anyway, that was the end of being in Israel, and I've never had any inclination to go back. So anyway, my parents carried on fostering, I think, until about 2010 or 2011. I'm not sure exactly when they stopped, but it was around about 2008 that I contacted the Daily Echo, because there was an advert in the Echo for the Citizen of the Year Award, which was 2008, and I wrote a long letter. In fact, I didn't mention it to my mum and dad, but I wrote a long letter to the people in charge of the competition, putting forward my mum's name, because I really felt that she had so many good reasons to be the Citizen of the Year. In fact, when I got married, she'd made my wedding dress, and she'd made my wedding dress as well as 6 bridesmaid dresses, all the time while she was teaching and fostering, and that was in the space of about 3 months. I mean, you know, she had hardly any time to do it. It was crazy. And poor mum, I really put things on her sometimes. When I look back on it, but I knew that she had the capability. She was a very clever lady. She could make things so well, and she did. She made me a fantastic wedding dress and some 6 bridesmaids dresses for all ages and different styles as well. So anyway, I wrote to the Echo and I explained all the things that she'd done, the fostering, the teaching, etc. And didn't hear anything back for quite a while. And then one day I was visiting my parents' house, and by this time I'd had already 3 children. Got married, had 3 children, and I was with them, and my mum looked at me and she said, did you write to the Echo about this and put my name forward for the Citizens of the Year award? And I said, yes, I did. She said, well, I've had a phone call from the editor who wants to come and meet me, or he wants us to go and meet them in a hotel in Bournemouth, and I've got through to the finalists, and it was amazing. So she got to meet the judges and the editor from the Daily Echo, had her photograph taken, and my dad of course went as well, because he was involved, you know, obviously with all the fostering too. And I must add that when my mum was you know, teaching adult education, she would for her drama classes, she would write her own plays, write them all herself, produce them all herself. My dad would do the scenery and help with the costumes, but everything, the whole production, was mainly done by my mum and dad. They were amazing, and I would help out, of course, you know, with the curtains, and the foster kids sometimes would come and help with the lights. You know, obviously they'd be shown what to do. So it was just a lovely experience, and I just thank God for them. And in fact, she became the runner-up. She won the runner-up prize, which was a cruise to Belgium, a weekend cruise, and they both went on it. My parents went on it and had a really nice time. And unfortunately, my brother, who had been suffering from different mental health problems over the years, that was nothing to do with my parents. That was from an outside source, unfortunately. He was quite ill during the time that the cruise for the first, if she'd won the first prize, they had a cruise in the summer to Mediterranean, and she told me, she said, if I had won the first prize, I wouldn't have been able to go because I couldn't have left. She couldn't have left my brother. So it was good that she won the second prize, because by that time he was a lot better, and this was in the autumn, and she was able to go. And they were able to go, I should say, with my dad. So I was just so pleased that, you know, that she won that, because she really deserved it. And in fact, the funny thing is that they announced the people, the winners, over the radio. I think it was the 2CR radio on the 1st of May at 8 o'clock in the morning. And of course we all had to be there, which was also my son's 5th birthday. So my son was sitting in the back room opening his presents while we were sitting in the lounge with my parents listening to the radio, and their next door neighbour came in to have a listen as well. And that was nice. That was a nice memory. But all of my memories with my parents were really nice. Christmas times, anywhere I would travel to or go to work in different parts of the country or study, I would always be really, really happy to come back home and look forward to it, because I knew my mum would always give me such a wonderful welcome, and my dad too, of course. But my mum was such a caring person, and clever, very clever. So this is for my parents, Norma and David Penny, Norma, South and Penny, and I just want to thank you for them, dear God. And this will go up on YouTube, and it is my way to remember them, because they don't have a gravestone, their names aren't written on different benches, which would be nice too, but I'll put a photograph of them on the YouTube thing. And this is just to remember my beautiful parents. Okay, thank you. Bye.